hey, stay home. You don't want to get in a wreck. But instead you pushed through and you said, no, I want to encounter. I want to get into his presence. I want to see what he has for me this morning. And you come with an expectant heart in this place. Amen. And are you ready to receive from him this morning? Amen. We are on a series. We kicked it off last week that we're calling From Dream to Destiny. Now I want you to understand, because I made the comment last week that so many Christians just live in this dream world. They get a dream, but they never step into their destiny. And there's a huge difference between just getting a dream and stepping into it. And the biggest thing, the number one thing that keeps you from stepping into and walking in your destiny is your character. That's the big thing. That is the thing that separates us from our dream, from our destiny, is our character. That God-given destiny requires a character in order to fulfill that destiny. We're looking at the life of Joseph, and Joseph, who God gave this big dream to at the age of 17, yet he didn't begin to walk into his destiny. He didn't begin to step into it until he was 30. For 23 years, he lived in a dream world, not his destiny. But we see that through that whole time, God was building his character that was required to fulfill the destiny that he had for him. And at 17, Joseph didn't have the character to step into his destiny. So for 23 years, God was working on him. We see right off the bat, Joseph had a pride problem. And he can't step into his destiny with pride in his heart. That'll stop it right there every time, because God wants to make sure that he gets glory for what he does. He doesn't share glory. And prideful people will always share. It will always be about them and not about him. So he has to get rid of the pride. And at 17, Joseph was full of pride, so God had to deal with that. And in his steps of dealing with his character and those tests that he went through, and I've realized that, man, we've got tests we have to go through. And here's the good news. If you have failed some test with God before, because how many God has given you some test and you failed him? Some of you others just don't even know you took the test. Here's some good news for you. God doesn't just fail you from the class. He lets you do retakes. So if you failed a test with God, it doesn't mean it's over. It just means you get to retake it again and again. And I have taken some tests way too many times to count the same old test with God. And I realized it because what happens, and it's like, man, I just went through this before. Why am I going through this again? And again, I realized I didn't pass. He's trying to build some character in me so I can fulfill what he has for me. So you get to retake some things. And we talked about last week the pride test, and this week we're going to go a little bit farther in the life of Joseph, and we're going to talk about the pit. So while you're still standing, let's just read this story. I promise the rest of the time I'm preaching, I'll let you sit. All right, so don't get... I know a couple Sunday nights ago, I didn't let them sit. So if you're here then, you'll be thankful that I let you sit tonight. or this morning. I'll probably let you sit tonight too. Genesis 37. We read up through 11. We're going to hit back on with starting with verse 12. We went through 11 last week. So it says, then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. Then he said to him, please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out to the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was wandering in the field. I just think that's funny. We know Joseph was a dreamer. His brothers refer to him as that. You'll see later. They refer to him and say, here comes that dreamer. We know he's a dreamer. Here he is on a mission, and here he finds himself just wandering around. You ever feel like that sometimes, that whenever God gives you something, you start to go, but then you find yourself just wandering around? And this man finds him. This certain man just finds him wandering around. Joseph didn't even know he was lost. Yeah, that's how it is with many of us sometimes. Aren't you glad a man found you, though? When you're wondering. I got spiritual right there. I don't know if it caught you or not, but Jesus, that man, found you in your wandering state. When you were lost and didn't even know it. And the man asked him, saying, what are you seeking? And he said, I'm seeking my brothers. Tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. That's northern Indiana, I think. Up around Kokomo. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. And they said to one another, look, this dreamer's coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands. Aren't you glad for some Reubens in your life? And said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. So it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So we all go through pits in our lives, times in our lives where it just feels like we're in the pits. We all go through it. It doesn't matter who you are. Every single person goes through moments in their lives that just feels like they're in a pit. You might even be in one here. And I've noticed you can be in several pits all at the same time sometimes. You can be a pit in your marriage. Be in a pit with your job. Be living in a financial pit or a relational pit. Even a spiritual pit. And most of the time when you get into a pit, You're not even sure how you got there, and you don't even know how to get out. But one thing is for certain, you won't move ahead in your destiny as long as you stay in the pit. So we're going to get out of it this morning. Amen. Before you're seated, will you turn to just a few people around you, give them a fist pump and tell them, get out of that pit. Get out of it this morning. Get out of that. You don't belong there. You do not belong in that pit. Amen. I heard a story once. I actually read it, and about a guy that he was walking home from. He worked the late shift, and he would walk home from work. It wasn't just that far away. And he'd tend to always take a shortcut through this cemetery. And this one night as he's walking through, and it was extremely dark. There was no moon out that night. And he's just walking through that cemetery, and he steps into a freshly dug grave. Just falls into it. And he's hollering for help, and there's nobody around. He's jumping, doing everything he can to get out. He can't get out. Finally, he just decides that there's nothing I can do. I can't get out of it on my own. I'll just sit down and I'll just wait till morning. When morning comes, they'll come, because they dug the grave for a reason. It wasn't for me, so they'll come and I'll be able to get out. So he just sits there, and about 2:30, 3 o'clock, after the bars had closed, a drunk come walking that night, walking through the same cemetery, and fell in the same grave. And that drunk man is hollering. He's yelling. He's jumping. He's doing whatever he can to get out of that grave. And about the time he's calming down, a hand reaches and touches that man on the shoulder, that drunk man, touches him on the shoulder, and a voice behind him says, "There's no use, you can't get out of here." But he did. Some got that, some didn't. He jumped. The point is, you can get out of the pit if you're motivated right. Things that you didn't think you could do, you can get out of when you get the right motivation in you. You can do those things in your life, and we've got to learn to get motivated to get out of the pit that we're in. God didn't mean for you to be in that pit, to live in that pit. The pit changes you, it builds your character, but you're not meant to stay there. It's meant to build you so that you can then walk out of it into the destiny that God has for you. So we want to look at areas in our lives through the story of Joseph, and look at areas that can get us out of the pit. And I realize the first thing you've got to look at is you've got to figure out why you're in the pit in the first place. It's important to know that. If you don't know why you're in the pit in the first place, you're not going to get out of the pit. It's important to realize why you're in the pit in the first place. And in order to figure out, I'm talking about doing some soul searching in your life. It takes some soul searching in your life to figure out, why am I in here? It's asking God, what is it in me that put me in this place? Because so many times when we're in a pit, we always want to blame someone else for us being in the pits. And we don't want to take any blame on ourselves. It would have been easy for Joseph to say, it was my brother's fault that I'm in here. It would have been easy for Joseph to say, they're the reason I'm in here. It's not me. It's not the jealousy inside of me, it's the envy inside, or it's not the pride in me, it's the jealousy in them. That's why I'm in the pit. It's the envy that they have. I'm just living my life. I'm just chasing my... I didn't do anything to be in here. It's all on them. And it's so easy to blame someone else for your circumstances. It's so easy to blame someone else for the reason that you're in the shape that you're in. And get people, and they'll blame the government for the financial pit they're in. And if the economy is just better, there's just not jobs. It's not my fault. You've never put God first in your life. You've never lived in that blessing that He has for you. You've always robbed from Him when the Word says to give to Him and put Him first. So the devourer comes in and takes everything from you. You've learned in your life you've never disciplined yourself. You overspend and undergive. But it's everybody else's fault. I'm in the financial pit I'm in. That was harsh. Huh? That was mean. But it's everybody else's fault. We don't want to take the blame for ourselves. If our marriage is in the pits, it's always our spouse's fault. I've never counseled a married couple and them say, Pastor, it's me. I messed up. I'm the one. No, it's always, no, it's them. This one here. Even Adam did that to God. That woman you gave me. We want to blame everybody else for the situation we're in. And as long as you're blaming someone else, you'll always stay in the pit in your life. Quit blaming others and do some soul searching for yourself. Why are you in there? Joseph, it would have been easy for Joseph in that pit to just say, it's all my brothers. I mean, for crying out loud, they hated me. And he would have been right. The Bible even says they hated him. But why did they hate him? Have you ever thought about that? Why did they hate him? Think about it this way. Why was Joseph at home with his dad and his brothers were out tending their sheep in another place? You know, most scholars believe this, that Jacob knew that the friction between Joseph and his brothers was so great that they couldn't get along. They hate each other so much that Jacob saw that and he had to separate them. And then Jacob, after a while, says, hey, why don't you go and check on your brothers? They didn't need Joseph to go check on them. I mean, Joseph was the younger brother. Joseph was 17. All the other brothers, they're 20, 30. In fact, the two oldest, Reuben and Simeon, they're in their 40s at this time. They know how to tend sheep. They know what they're doing. Jacob wasn't sending Joseph there to check on them, to make sure they're doing it right. Jacob was sending Joseph there trying to build a relationship there that did not exist. He was hoping enough time has passed. Now maybe you can go and just talk and y'all can build something and quit instead of hating one another. I mean, there's this whole bit, and it says that when Joseph showed up, even while he was afar off, they saw him coming. Why do you think they saw him? Why do you think they could point him out from a mile away? Because Joseph is wearing this god-awful, multicolored coat that stands out from nobody else has a coat that looks like this. This multicolored coat of many colors. This coat that says, I'm Daddy's favorite. Rubbing it in their face. Does not have a relationship with them. Go check on them. Let me grab my coat. They need to see this. I'm still his favorite. I'm the one that doesn't have to do anything. I'm the one that's blessed. I'm the one. And he wears this coat of many colors, just showing. I mean, he wore this coat everywhere. He wore a coat that was meant to keep him warm, and he would wear it when it's 90 degrees outside. Just to show it off. I'm just showing off my favor. I'm just showing off that I'm Daddy's favor. I'm just showing off my gift. Can I put how this kind of relates to us? Because I know, let me put it this way, parallels here. Joseph wore the coat. The coat was a gift from his father. You have a gift from your father. The gift represented the favor that he had from his father. You have favor from your father. But Joseph showed it off and wore it everywhere he went. I know a lot of Christians, listen to me now, this is pride. This is what Joseph was dealing with. A lot of Christians that wear their gift everywhere, show it off, brag about it, look at what I've got, and they've lost that. Can I just tell you, the giver is better than the gift. Every time. And our focus becomes more about the gift than who gave us the gift. Our focus is more about what I can do and what I've been blessed with. And you'll have people come up to and just, I don't know if you realize this, I'm a prophet. I mean, they just throw it in the conversation like, I don't know, so? It's all about the gift. It's all about this. It's like, no, it's not about the gift. It's about the giver. Joseph didn't have to wear a coat everywhere to show off that he was his father's favorite. He just needed to realize, I have the favor of my father in my life. But he shows it off everywhere. And watch this. He shows it off, and because of pride in his life, he lost the gift that his father gave him. That's big. It was because of his pride, that thing that he was most proud of, that he wanted to show off to everyone, he eventually lost because the pride that was in his life. And I know right now you're kind of thinking, going, now, Pastor, that's not biblical because God doesn't take away the gifts he gives us. Because I kind of know where you're going with this, and God doesn't take away because the callings of God are without repentance, so he doesn't take away. It doesn't say that the Father took away Joseph's gift. He has lost his gift. The Father didn't take it away. It was the pride in his life that allowed him to lose it. I'm telling you, God doesn't take it away from you, but the pride in your life will cause you to lose the gifts that he's given you. But here's some good news. When you allow your character to build back up, when you allow God to take even through those pits, and you might have lost some things in your life. I don't know if you realize how the story ends. You know, the sad thing, not only did he lose his coat, he lost his relationship with his father. For all those years, not only did he lose the gift, he lost the relationship with his father, the one who gave him the gift in the first place. But because he allowed his character to grow, because he allowed it to mature him and finally begin to walk in his destiny, there was a time if you finish out, if you read the story of Joseph, you'll know that he becomes second in command of the richest country in the world at that moment in Egypt. He is the second richest person in the world at that time. Well, he might have lost that coat, but in life, he had all the coats he wanted later on. God blessed him. He had a closet full of colored coats if he wanted those colored coats. He still had and he also got his relationship restored back with his father. I'm telling you, if you allow God to humble you and build your character, He will restore everything that you lose because of your pride. He'll restore it back into your life. So he lost it all, though, in this pit at this moment. He realizes there had to be a point that he realized that there has to be some responsibility on me. That's what I'm telling you. You've got to begin to soul search your life and ask God, while I'm in this pit, God, what is it in me that needs to change? What is it in me that you're trying to pull out of me so that I can walk in my destiny that you have for me? God, it's not just them, it's me. But then, as you're in the pit, it's one thing to know why you're there. But when you're there, you've got to make sure that you get God's perspective of the pit and not Satan's perspective of the pit. Because I promise you, when you are in the pit, the accuser of the brethren, Satan, will show up and begin to tell lies in your life. He will begin to share with you his perspective of why you're there. He will begin to share his perspective of what's taking place. I promise, the accuser of the brethren will always find you in the pit. Here's what he'll say. Here's how you know, because he says this to everyone. He will say, you messed up too bad. You know why you're here. You blew it. You'll never get out. That's when it starts. You know it's Satan. You'll never get out of here. You went too far this time. You'll never be able to be anything. That dream that you had, you might as well give that up. You'll never be anything. You talk about your brothers bowing down to you. They're not going to bow down to you. My goodness, you're so far beneath them at this point in your life. You'll never get to a place where they're bowing to you. You'll never get out of this. You messed up too far. You already lost God's favor. You've already lost your gift. You feel that relationship seeking or moving away, and you just think, man, the accuser will always tell you you've messed up too bad. Here's what I want you to realize. The accuser will always condemn you where you're at. Jesus, God, will never condemn you. He never will. Satan will always condemn you. When he speaks, he will always condemn you. God will never condemn you. In fact, we quote John 3:16 all the time. That's one of our favorites. We quote it, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. But we miss John 3:17. And I think you need to memorize John 3:17 just as much as you do John 3:16, because John 3:17 says, for God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world. He won't condemn, but that the world through him might be saved. God never condemns you. Satan always condemns you. God instead convicts you. There's a difference. There's a difference. Condemnation brings death. Condemnation brings no hope. Condemnation says it's over. Conviction says you messed up, but if you surrender and cry out, I can get you out of this. Condemnation says you messed up and you'll never get out. Conviction says you messed up, but I can help you. I can pull you out. This isn't the end. There is hope. Conviction always brings hope with it in life. Remember the New Testament. When there's this woman who is caught in adultery. And here she's caught in this very act of adultery, and her accusers have already condemned her to death. They have the stones in their hands ready to throw at her until she dies. And they bring her to Jesus at this moment, wanting Him to condemn her with them. And Jesus instead bends down and begins to write in the sand. And we don't know what He wrote, but whatever He did write didn't condemn, it convicted. Because the accusers started dropping their stones instead of throwing them and walking out. And Jesus, down on the ground, looks up at this woman that now it's just Him and her. And His words at that moment are so wonderful because He says, "Woman, where are your accusers?" Remember where accusations come from. Always from Satan. "Woman, where's your accusers?" And she goes, "I guess I don't have any." And His next phrase is, "Neither do I condemn you, but I do convict. Go and sin no more." Conviction won't leave you in the place that you're at. Conviction forces a change in your life. Conviction is different than condemnation. Condemnation will leave you in the pit to die. Conviction will pull you out to live. There's a difference at that moment. Satan always condemns. And he always lies when he does it. And he's good at it. He's so good at it, everything he speaks is a lie. That's all. He's the father of lies, is how the word describes him. How do you know he's lying? He's speaking. If Satan's speaking, he's lying. And what he does when you are in the pit and he's lying to you, he will fabricate evidence and make it appear like it's real in your life. And you begin to believe the evidence that he's presenting to you at that moment. He's so sneaky, so good at it. And it brings fear in your life. In fact, I love what fear stands for. If you just took it, fear, F-E-A-R, fear, and it stands for this: false evidence appearing real. Because Satan's so good at it, he presents you with this false evidence and it looks real, it appears real, and it brings fear in your life, but it's really not real. It's a lie from the pit itself. And he's so good at it. Look at what I'm talking about. Because later on, we see this in verse 31 of that chapter 37. Look at what he does. It says, "So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. When they sent the tunic of many colors. Then they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "We found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not?" And he recognized it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him." Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces. Let me ask you, had a wild beast devoured Joseph? No. No, not at all. In fact, they didn't even tell him a wild beast had devoured him. As you read before, that was their plan. They had said, "Hey, we'll just tell him. We're going to kill him, and then we'll just tell Dad a wild beast devoured him." But when it got down to it, they didn't even have to lie like that. They didn't say it. They just took his tunic, that coat of colors, and dipped it in the blood of a goat, and then just brought it to their dad and said, "Hey, do you know whose this is?" I'm not sure. It kind of looks like Joseph. I've never really seen him wear it. And Jacob, presented with this false evidence, believes the lie at that moment and says, "It's his. It's over. A wild beast has killed him. He's torn to pieces now. I've lost my son forever. It's over with." And it was a lie. Satan will fabricate evidence in your life. When you're in the pit, he's so good at it that he will just present you with something that looks a little bit like the truth, but it's not. He'll fabricate it. And then all of a sudden you're believing this lie in your life. And I've watched people believe this lie forever. And he'll tell you, look, when you're in that pit, that marriage pit, and it's hard to come out of at that moment, all of a sudden Satan will begin to present to you fabricated evidence. He'll say, look, you weren't supposed to be with them anyway. That wasn't who you were supposed to marry. Look, y'all don't even get along. Y'all are totally different. And then he'll present somebody that you work with. You got little things in common, sharing things, and then Satan saying, "See, you're supposed to be with this one. That's really your soulmate. You just messed up. You married the wrong person." It's a lie from the pits. It is a lie from Satan. Don't fall for the trap. Don't fall for the lies as he's presenting to you at that moment. Don't fall for it. Realize the source that it's coming from. It is a lie from the pit of hell. And he'll fabricate it. And he'll lie. And I think the harshness of it all, because Joseph's brothers knew the truth. And they watched their father for 20-something years mourn and cry and weep as his son, as he believes this lie that his son, his favorite, is dead. And for years, 20 plus, they're watching their father cry in despair without no hope. And the whole time they knew the truth. The whole time, they could have just come in there, in the room where he was, and just say, Dad, listen, we messed up, but your son isn't dead. He's alive. He's living somewhere. We sold him into slavery, but we can find him. They knew the truth, but for 20 plus years, they allowed their father to believe this lie. And that is the very essence. Listen, that's the hardness of sin. That Satan himself will allow you to believe this lie and destroy your life for years and years and years and years and years. And I'm telling you, as long as you believe it, you'll stay in that pit of despair. Listen, quit believing the lies. Satan will tell you it's over. He'll tell you you're not good enough. He'll tell you you'll never make it. He'll tell you that your future's done with. Quit buying into the lies. Because as long as you believe the lies, you'll stay in the pit. So learn to get God's perspective while you're in there and not Satan's perspective. God will tell you, I can get you out. God will tell you there's hope. God will tell you through His Word, His promises are true. He'll tell you He's faithful. He'll tell you, listen, I don't care what pit you're in, there's a promise to get you out. Get into His Word. Start buying into Him. Get His perspective of your situation, not Satan's perspective. So he's there in this pit, and you've got to get the right perspective, but you've also got to realize the purpose of it if you're going to get out. You've got to realize the purpose of it. And here's the purpose of the pit. It is to get you to cry out to Him. Every time. The purpose of the pit is to get you to cry out to God. And I've watched people, as you realize we do it as Christians, when we find ourselves in a pit, we cry out. What happens a lot of times, though, is we get out of that pit and we think, well, that wasn't so bad after all. I was able to get out of it. I guess, God, I didn't need you after all. I guess I was okay. And then you'll find yourself in a deeper pit next time. And a deeper pit. And a deeper pit until you realize, God, I need you. And you cry out to Him with everything in you. And it's, God, I need you. That's the purpose of the pit. Is to make you realize that you need Him and you'll cry out to Him. Well, let me show you in Scripture, because there's another person that got in a pit. Not just Joseph. There's another person in the Bible that got in a pit. His name was Jonah. And Jonah had a huge destiny in his life. His destiny was to save a city. A large city. Largest of that day. To reach out with the gospel and to deliver this city from destruction that God had for them. And Jonah gets, instead of walking towards his destiny and going to Nineveh, goes in the totally opposite direction, gets on a boat to head to Tarshish, as far away as he knew that he could get from Nineveh at that moment. And there, as he's going to Tarshish, on his way, the storm comes up and he's overthrown. And he finds himself in the belly of a fish or as he calls it, a pit. And watch as everything changes in him, as he's inside this pit of despair. It's all over, that I've messed up. I was supposed to go here, but I ran and I went there. And in the second chapter of Jonah, just look at this in that first verse. It says, "Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the fish's belly. And he said, I cried out to the Lord because of my affliction." Your affliction, your pit will always cause you to cry out to him. That's the purpose of it. I cried out to the Lord of my affliction, because of my affliction, and he answered me out of the belly of Sheol. I cried, and you heard my voice. Sheol, a Hebrew word. It's translated a couple of times. It's used throughout the Old Testament. It's translated sometimes just left as the word Sheol, what it is. Sometimes it's translated as hell. In Numbers and Deuteronomy, it's translated as the pit. Jonah is saying, out of the belly of the pit, out of the belly of the pit, I cried, and you heard my voice. Watch it, what he says in verse 6. Goes on, it says, the earth with its bars closed behind me forever. In other words, I was in this prison, in this pit, and was never going to get out. Yet you have brought up my life from the pit. O Lord, my God. Listen, I don't know what pit you're in. But I do know that if you cry out to him, to God, he will pull you out. That's his promise. I know the accuser has been telling you something else, but that's his promise. He will pull you out. I don't care if it's a financial pit, he'll pull you out if you trust in him. I don't care if your marriage is in the pits, he will pull you out. I don't care if emotionally you're in the pit, he will pull you out when you cry out to him. That's the purpose of it. That's the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to bring you back to him. I love parallels in the Word. I don't know if you realize Old Testament is a picture of the New Testament. That's how I put it a lot. I mean, it is. It just paints the picture. It gives you the visual picture of what is taking place in the New Testament. I don't know if you realize the parallels between the story of Joseph and Christ. I mean, think about it. From the very beginning, you have Reuben. Reuben, who is said the oldest one, should have been God. He should have been his father's favorite. He's the oldest. But instead, he relinquishes that. And in this story, it's Reuben that says, don't kill him. That speaks up to his brothers and says, do not kill him. We'll just put him in here for a little bit. But the purpose of that pit, Reuben's saying, let's throw him in the pit, because the purpose of it in him was that he would pull him out of the pit and bring him back to his father. That's a picture of Christ. The oldest, the son, the favor, but saying, no, I'm going to relinquish that. I'm going to come down to where they are. And my purpose is so that I can pull you out of the pit and bring you back into relationship with your Father. Other parallels that you see is Joseph as he's going through this, and as he's just the things that take place because Joseph was stripped of his robe when he was thrown in. Jesus was stripped of his robe before he was crucified. Joseph was sold, if you read on the story, Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver to the Midianite traders, who would in turn have sold him to the Egyptians, which it says, for a profit. The price of a slave in that time, and to sell for a profit, the price of a slave at that moment in Egypt in that time was 30 pieces of silver. So Joseph was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Joseph was betrayed by his brother Judah. Jesus was betrayed by Judas. Judah and Judas in Hebrew is the same word. Want to know where parallels stop? There's even more. But where they stop, Joseph deserved to be in the pit. Jesus didn't do anything to deserve to be in the pit. Ephesians tells us that when Christ died, he went down into the pit. He descended into the pit. But he didn't deserve to be in it. In fact, you and I deserve to be in the pit. You and I are the ones who have failed. You and I are the ones who have sinned. You and I are the ones who deserve to be in the pit. But Jesus went into the pit so that we don't have to. In fact, look at this in Psalms, and I promise I'm closing up. In Psalm 16:10 it says, "For you will not leave my soul in Sheol." You will not leave my soul. This is a messianic prophecy right here. You will not leave my soul in hell. You will not leave my soul in the pit. You will not leave me there. I might have to go, but you will pull me out. Listen, if God the Father would not leave His only begotten Son in the pit, He won't leave you in the pit either. If you cry out to Him, He will pull you out of your despair. He will pull you out of your hopelessness. You weren't meant to live in the pit. He died so that you could have life. He went to the pit so you don't have to go there. He's got a destiny for you. He's got a purpose for you. But you will never fulfill it as long as you stay in the pit in your life. But if you cry out, He will reach down and pull you out and give you a hope. Come on, I want you to stand with me this morning. I don't know what pit you're going through. I don't know what you're dealing with. It might be just a struggle. It might be a pit of depression. It might be just a pit of addiction. It might be a pit with your relationships, a pit financially.